Warning: contains adult content including harsh language, violence, and sexual themes, and may not be suitable for people under age 17.
This room was not illuminated by typical lights, but instead, glowing orbs of all sizes hung in the air with no support, as well as sat on the floor and objects. Floor? No, it was more like ground, for it was the most beautiful green grass Tilly had ever seen. There were also very large mushrooms that gave off different colored lights, almost looking like they were under a black light. There were healthy bushes, trees, flowers, vines crawling up the walls, and a medium-sized pond in a corner. Tilly could hear the croaks of frogs and chirps of crickets. The last thing she noticed were 6 butterflies scattered around the room, each a different color: bright white, a deep royal blue, soft lavender, sunshine yellow, calm cyan, and shocking hot pink. Each one was glowing like the mushrooms. Tilly was absolutely breathtaking. Said Eliza, noticing her expression. "I knew you'd like this one. Hey guys, can we come in? I want to introduce you to our new friend."
"Of course, Miss Eliza,"
peeped a tiny voice from absolutely nowhere. Bewildered, Tilly followed Eliza inside, and when the door closed, the place looked even more beautiful.
Who lives here?"
Tilly asked Eliza softly, not sure if she should be quiet as if they were in a library.
"Oh, these are our fairies."
At that moment, what Tilly thought were butterflies shot into the air and zoomed right up to the 2 of them. Tilly realized that there was a 7th pair of wings that she hadn't seen before, for they were black, sheer, and glittered like the night sky. Each figure appeared to be human, but they were 3 inches tall and had ears that were pointed at the top. Their features were pretty easy to see as they were exposed to the light of their wings, all except the 7th one.
"Hello,"
chirped the same voice as before, which came from the fairy with pink wings.
"My name is Louise. Welcome to our home."
Louise looked like a mini version of a 15-year-old girl, and she had a very adorable doll-like figure, even having a button nose and cute little lips, which were crimson. Her short hair, which was pulled up into tiny poofy pigtails, was a light blonde like Kelly's was, except Louise's had a yellow tinge to it, complementing her ivory skin, and she had big blue eyes. She wore a very short, sparkly scarlet dress, held up by thin straps, and appeared to be wearing opaque white stockings, but no shoes. Looking to the others, Tilly realized none of the fairies wore shoes. "They're all very kind to people who are kind to them," Eliza said to Tilly. "Anyway, why don't the rest of you introduce yourselves?"
"My name is Angelique,"
said the fairy with white wings in a very soothing voice, who looked like a young adult, giving a little bow. Her dress was elegant silk that fell to her ankles, and her feet were bare. The dress had flowy, short sleeves, and it was low cut, showing off very impressive cleavage. Her skin was also ivory, pale pink hair tied into a side braid that hung over her left shoulder, and it was so long it went past her very curvy hips. Angelique's modest face was almost flawless, having bright gray eyes and pretty lips colored pearl pink. The last thing Tilly saw was a tiny necklace with a round silver pendant the size of a pinhead.
"I'm Samson,"
said the next fairy, who was a very attractive adult male with a mildly feminine appearance and had the deep blue wings. He had an extremely melodic baritone voice. His wavy hair was blonde like Louise's, but his was a much deeper yellow, almost like the petals of a dandelion, and fell past his cheekbones. Like the previous 2, his skin was pleasingly pale, his blue eyes a bit darker than Louise's, and having a green tinge. He wore all white like Angelique, having a blazer with no shirt beneath it, buttoned down just enough to expose his chest. The matching pants were simple slacks.
"I'm Millicent,"
cried another younger adult female, but her voice was high and cracked when she had spoken. She covered her mouth, her light beige cheeks turning pink with embarrassment. Her lavender wings fluttered a bit quicker than the others, and Tilly got the impression that she was regularly nervous.
"I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shout."
Her voice had become much softer.
"Millicent is a big ball of shy anxiety,"
explained the male fairy with cyan wings, looking around 17. Millicent blushed more and put her tiny hands over her innocent hazel eyes, jet black hair framing her hidden face. It looked too soft to even be able to feel when touched, shining like silk and reaching to the small of her back. Her body was very modestly curvy, her breasts a bit smaller, and she wore a violet halter top that just barely exposed her belly button, along with a pleated black knee-high skirt. Her stockings were the same shade of lavender as her wings. The young male who had explained Millicent's behavior introduced himself as Belmont. His skin was the darkest of the 7, being caramel-colored. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and was swept to the side. The front was longer than the back, messy at the top, and fringe reaching to his jaw. His eyes were very dark brown as well, and were slanted as if he was of Asian heritage. Valmont wore a plain gray muscle shirt and blue jeans, as well as having what looked like a very tiny, colorful friendship bracelet made from sewing thread on his right wrist. The next fairy was the last girl, Yellow Wings, appearing Valmont's age, and her name was Dandy. Her energy levels seemed to be right between Angelique's and Louise's, having a lovely and kind smile that was void of lip color. Her skin was just slightly darker than the other girls', having a more sandy look to it. Dandy's eyes were a strange, pale green color that made it hard to look away, and her shoulder-length hair was warm burgundy, pulled into a side ponytail tied by a red ribbon. She wore a pleated skirt like Millicent, but hers was navy blue and very short, exposing her backside if she were to bend forward. However, she also had on opaque black leggings that came down to mid-thigh, the rest of her legs being bare. Lastly, her top was a white sleeveless tunic, and there was a silver hoop earring around her neck, acting as a choker.
"And my name is Kale,"
said the last boy, who sported the strange celestial wings. His skin was just as pale as a majority of the fairies, and his hair was medium length and colored midnight blue. Tiny black framed glasses sat in front of his eyes, which were a much brighter green than Dandy's. He also appeared to be wearing black eyeliner. His shirt was black and long-sleeved, but he wore a dark gray t-shirt over it. His legs were covered by black denim skinny jeans, and looking closely, Tilly could see a bracelet matching Valmont's on his left wrist. "Wow!" she breathed, staring at the beautiful creatures. "It's so nice to meet all of you,"
"You are welcome in our room any time during the day when we are not asleep,"
said Samson, giving a tiny bow.
"as long as you are friendly, of course."
Many of our fellow residents like to enjoy our peaceful environment,
Dandy continued.
It is a great place to meditate, for we are a calm species to those who are kind.
"There have been a few whom we have banned," said Angelique. "There are a few reasons for this. One is disrespect toward our race, another is general unkindness, and the last is that some species pose a threat, as they are our predators."
"Unfortunately, even though the werewolves are kind, they are one of our natural enemies, so they are not allowed in here,"
Samson explained.
"They have countless times tried to resist the urge to eat us, but it is nature's way. We do not blame them for being driven by their instincts."
Without any kind of warning, Louise spun around excitedly, cooing with delight. "Louise loves to make new friends," said Eliza. "She's the youngest and most energetic. Millicent is shy, Angelique and Samson are married, Kale and Valmont are a couple, and Dandy is Louise's adopted older sister. They both lost their parents in a fire and decided to stick together."
We pretty much became sisters instantly,
said Dandy with a warm smile. "Kale and Valmont are started Tilly, a bit surprised.
Couple, yes,
Eliza finished for her. "They've been together since before they moved in, having been from the same colony. Unfortunately, same-sex relationships are even more looked down upon than in the human world, so they were banished. I believe it was Angelique who crossed paths with them and offered for them to live here with her and Samson." Angelique nodded, a rather pleased smile on her delicate face.
Then they all sort of formed their own colony here in the boarding house.
"Why are Millicent, Angelique, and Samson not with their colonies?" Tilly inquired, hoping she wasn't crossing any lines by asking.
"We were unhappy with how things were run in our colony,"
said Angelique, gesturing to her husband.
And I did not fit in with anyone.
Millicent muttered sadly.
I do not make friends very well.
"Well, I like you," Tilly assured her, and Millicent smiled thankfully.
"Are you going to visit Emily next?"
asked Valmont firmly, and Eliza nodded.
"Can you remind her that I am not interested in her?"
"I'm not going to get into your personal lives," said Eliza. "You can tell her yourself. Speaking of, we should go see her now. You guys have a lovely evening, okay?"
Bye, Miss Eliza,
said the fairies at the same time, and they left the enchanted room. Tilly blinked, having almost forgotten that they were still indoors.
"Tilly,"
Eliza said quietly before they ventured to the last door,
"please refrain from talking about the fairies in front of Emily. She's sort of spiteful toward them."
"Why?"
"You'll see."
Without knocking, Eliza opened the last door, which was nearly the opposite of the fairies' room. It was as big as the regular apartments, but it had no utilities. It was a nature scene like the fairies, but instead of being dark, it was as if the sun was right on the horizon, filling the entire area with golden light. There was the similar green grass, trees, bushes, and flowers, but no mushrooms. Instead, there were rocks of all shapes and sizes, and little shelves built into the walls to resemble the edges of cliffs. Instead of a pond, there was a thin creek running from one side of the room to the next, and the source was a low waterfall coming off of a shelf. Looking closer, Tilly saw that there was a small puddle with little guppies swimming around.
Emily,
Eliza called softly.
Emily, I have someone for you to meet.
A tiny woman crawled out of a tulip and fluttered into the air. At first, Tilly thought it was another fairy, but began to notice small differences. Her wings had veins like an insect's, and were slightly smaller and less decorative. They were ice pink, and instead of glowing, a tiny amount of sparkling dust floated off with every flutter. Emily's pointed ears were a bit more round, and were in a shape that more or less resembled a cat's ear. The tip was pointed downward, as opposed to upward like the fairies, and were pierced, little golden hoops hanging from the lobes.
Hi, Eliza,
said the little woman, appearing to be about 19 or 20.
What's up?
Emily's voice was very sweet, but her behavior was much less proper and more casual than the fairies had been. I'd like you to meet Tilly, Eliza said, pointing at Tilly. She's our new human. She's very nice. Tilly, Emily is a pixie. Oh! Tilly exclaimed. Upon closer inspection, she saw that Emily's pupils were vertical ovals, almost like rounded cat pupils. The irises were magenta, she had near white skin, and short, wispy, bubblegum pink hair, just a few shades darker than her wings. Emily was quite skinny, but had attractive curves that she had no problem showing off. She wore extremely short shorts, which were violet, a lighter shade of purple cut-off shirt that hung over both shoulders, a black collar with a sparkly gold pendant, purple and black striped stockings that were above the knee, and matching fingerless gloves. The shorts were so low-riding, Tilly could see a tiny black heart tattoo on Emily's left hip bone.
Cool, a human,
said Emily ecstatically.
I've never even seen one before. I'm surprised how much you look like a pixie except without wings, and you're bigger. But I always heard humans were ugly with oily, wrinkled skin, and they smell.
Well, every human is different, said Tilly, taken aback by her bluntness.
Pixies are all pretty. You're pretty, though. I'm glad you're my first human. We should hang out. I'm more fun than those snooty fairies.
Eliza bit her lip, and since the subject came up on its own, Tilly decided to get the story. Why don't you like the fairies? She asked. Emily crossed her arms and fluttered her wings much faster for a brief moment. Not only did a large amount of pixie dust shoot everywhere, but they also made a buzz sound like a bee.
They're so stuck up, she replied angrily. All I wanted was to hang out with them because I'm the only pixie here, so I thought, well, fairies are our close cousins, so maybe I can hang out with them. They let me into their habitat, which I didn't really like because I like sunlight, but I shoved it off. I was getting along pretty well with Louise and Dandy, but I guess they thought some of the things I said were rude. But I wasn't meaning to be rude. But then I saw Belmont and just fell head over heels for him. But he's gay, apparently, dating that moody Kale dude. But I'm convinced that Belmont is in the basement, which is what I call a straight person who thinks they're gay instead of the other way around, which is coming out of the closet. So I keep trying to flirt with Belmont, but he definitely wants nothing to do with me. And none of the fairies like my mannerisms because they're so snooty and polite. So they banned me.
She spoke so fast, Tilly had trouble following along. She got the gist, though. Maybe fairies and pixies are like cats and dogs, she said gently. They just don't get along.
They get along with sprites just fine, even though they are hardly related to us. They don't have wings. I'd expect them to hang out with wisps or nymphs. But no one likes the pixies. Just because we like to have fun and aren't afraid to get rough sometimes. There's so much to enjoy in life. It's a playground, but no one understands that.
Emily huffed angrily, ending her little rant. I like you, Tilly said kindly. She honestly did, but she also liked the fairies, so she hoped Emily wouldn't hold a grudge against her for that. The pixie twirled in the air, sparkling dust swirling in a tiny vortex.
Yay! She exclaimed. We can hang out. I'm in my room most of the time because there's sunlight, so you know where to find me.
Will do, Tilly replied with a laugh. We'll see you later, okay, Emily? Said Eliza, and Emily waved enthusiastically.
Bye-bye!
With that, Tilly and Eliza left the room, and they went back into the lobby. She pointed at a door to their left. That's the kitchen, and the door next to it is the playroom/lounge, said Eliza, pointing out the doors. There you can just hang out, play games, mingle, whatever kicks your can. Kicks my can? Asked Tilly, unsure if she had heard correctly. It's like whatever floats your boat, she explained. We've got different slang words and phrases than the ones humans usually use. Okay, second floor! As they climbed the wooden stairs, they came face to face with another young girl, appearing to be in her mid-teens. Tilly once again had to keep from crying out in alarm, for this girl was unlike anything she had ever seen. Then again, so was most of the stuff in this building. The young girl's skin was a sea green color, but it was composed of thousands of shiny scales like a lizard. Her wide eyes were completely yellow, the pupils being slits like a snake's. Her jet-black hair was short and fluffy, almost looking more like fur than hair, and there were yellow-tinted nails that curved to form claws on her hands. She was wearing a simple black dress with short sleeves, the skirt falling to mid-thigh, and on her feet were black open-toed sandals, revealing more claws. Looking closer, Tilly noticed that this girl only had 4 fingers and 3 toes.
Oh, good, Zoe!
Eliza exclaimed, and the girl's lipless mouth curved into a rather cute smile.
This is Tilly, our new resident. Zoe,
As you probably already noticed, is a lizard girl. She's very close friends with Louise.
I'd shake your hand, but I'm still trying to get the hang of not accidentally scratching people,
said Zoe with a shrug.
I don't really like cutting my nails because it's uncomfortable, so I'm trying to make sure to avoid hurting someone.
Why don't you make covers for your claws out of wax? Then they won't be sharp, but will still be thin enough to feel like claws. And you can have different colors, Tilly suggested, and she saw Zoe's pupils dilate as she gasped.
You are a genius!
She exclaimed.
I will try that. Thank you, Tilly.
You're welcome. If you are a reptile, how do you have hair?
It's a wig,
Zoe replied.
I look so unattractive without it. Plus, it keeps me from cockatieling.
Cockatieling? Tilly inquired.
I have a fin-like appendage on my head that lies flat, but if I'm scared or angry, it flares up. The motivation to keep the wig in good condition helps keep me calm and content in stressful or unpleasant situations.
Makes sense, Tilly muttered.
I'm going to go see Louise. It was nice meeting you, Tilly,
said Zoe, and then waved at Eliza as she scampered down the stairs.
She's so sweet,
Eliza said as they continued to the second floor. Her species is normally very violent, but she came to us because she decided she didn't want to be that way. Zoe's had a difficult time, but she's a great deal less dangerous than she was as a child. How does she pay rent? Tilly asked. Her parents send me checks, Eliza replied. They understood what Zoe wanted, and they love her very much, so they support and help her any way they can. Oops, looks like we can't go in here. They had stopped in front of a door that appeared to be made of thicker wood. On the doorknob, there was a sign that said, "Come back later." Who lives here? Tilly wondered aloud, and to her surprise, Eliza blushed and giggled rather sneakily. This, my dear Tilly, she said slyly, is where Annalise and Solomon live. They are very happily married. Tilly didn't understand why Eliza was using such an odd tone. What are they? She asked, her brow furrowed. Annalise is a succubus, and Solomon is an incubus, Eliza said, still smiling. In layman's terms, they are sex demons. Happily married sex demons. Get it? Now it was Tilly's turn to blush, her cheeks growing scarlet. Honestly, I have never seen a couple that were so deeply in love with each other, and they showed emotionally as well as physically. It's only odd for their species because succubi and incubi aren't usually committed to one person, but they are a completely different story. Even so, if you see this sign on the door, do not open it or even knock on it. I don't think I have to tell you why. No, Tilly squeaked. Their room is also soundproof, but all of the rooms have a one-way intercom system in case I need to relay something important to you guys, either one at a time or all at once. So, if there is an emergency, and our little love demons can't hear us, I can call them without having to walk in on them. For any species or race, that's kind of embarrassing. No kidding, said Tilly with a laugh. I have a younger brother who still lives with my parents, and when he was 15, he'd get walked in on while taking care of things. It was not a very pleasant experience for any of us. Eliza let out a loud laugh, and both women continued to giggle as they passed the temporarily forbidden door. There were only 2 more rooms following the demons. This one is yours, said Eliza at the next door, but continued on to the last, rapping her knuckles on it. Hey, Ralph, I'm opening the door, okay? There was a shockingly loud and squishy shifting.
All right, come in,
said a male voice when the sound subsided. Before opening the door, Eliza turned to Tilly again. You've seen a lot of strange things here, right? She asked quickly and quietly. Yeah, Tilly said, unsure. Well, brace yourself, because this is the strangest thing you will see today. She had been right. When Eliza opened the door, Tilly clapped her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming in terror. The entire room, including tables, couches, chairs, and other household objects, were covered in what looked like flesh. It was pink and squishy, looking like inside-out skin, thin veins spreading lightly over the shiny surface. The flesh wasn't bloody, but wet with colorless mucus. It also looked as though larger versions of each human organ were present, but they were sitting in extremely random places. The basketball-sized heart was beating calmly on top of a lamp, huge lungs hanging in the upper corner on the other side of the room. The stomach sat on the floor in the opposite corner, and it appeared that the rest of the digestive tract was trailing through the next hall, probably to a bathroom. Both kidneys had been placed in a fleshy flower pot. The spleen and liver made couch cushions. The pancreas was on top of the television. The screen was visible through a rectangular hole in the flesh, and the remaining organs seemed to decorate the walls in place of picture frames. The brain itself hung in the very center of the ceiling. Each organ was properly hooked up to form a working system, along with valves, arteries, nerves, etc. The only things that seemed to be missing were muscles and bones. On the wall directly across from the door Tilly and Eliza were standing in was a regular human-sized face that appeared to be inside out as well. It had a mouth with no teeth or lips, there were no nostrils, and no eyelids. It was a pretty ridiculous sight, as the eyeballs seemed to be stuck above the mouth like Velcro balls.
"Oh, why hello,"
said the face, and Tilly squeaked.
"Oh, don't be frightened. I'm no threat. I'm a pacifist."
"Ralph, meet Tilly. Tilly, this is Ralph," said Eliza cheerily. "He's a huge glob of flesh, but it's uncomfortable for him to roll around in a ball, so he stretches all over the room. That's why we don't come all the way in, because it'll hurt if we step on him." Tilly looked to the floor, seeing the same squishy covering acting as carpet. There was a small bit rolled up to make room for the door opening.
"I'd be human if I wasn't a blob,"
Ralph joked.
"but I like being this way. I'm like an entire room myself. I use my organs to decorate the room. Oh, there's my pancreas!"
A fleshy hand and arm came out of the wall above the television and picked up the organ. The hand lifted it and plopped it right onto the wall above.
"I'm always losing track of that one. I can find my testicles just fine, but that pancreas..."
"Ralph, don't talk about your testicles in front of people! That's so rude!" Eliza exclaimed, but she was trying to stop herself from laughing. Tilly, on the other hand, was extremely warm with embarrassment.
"Hey, at least I don't wave my privates around,"
Ralph argued matter-of-factly.
"I keep them with my bowels, don't I? Privates are private."
"Tell that to Jeremy," said Eliza, rolling her eyes. "Anyway, we've got to hurry and meet the rest before it gets dark."
"Have a nice evening, ladies,"
said Ralph, and once the door shut, a loud, wet thwomp told Tilly that the fold of skin filled the empty space on the floor. "Why doesn't he smell?" Tilly asked. That was probably the reason why she hadn't thrown up. "Not sure," Eliza admitted. They passed a thick steel door directly in the center of the second floor. "Who's in there?" said Tilly. "I'm going to save that one until before we go into the attic." The other half of the floor was identical to the previous one, except that the first door wasn't made with soundproof wood. "This is Zoe's." Coming to the second one, Eliza knocked, and the door slowly creaked ajar. Tilly could only see a huge blue eye peering through the crack, looking from Eliza to Tilly.
Yes,
It squeaked in a young male's voice. "Hi, Cameron," said Eliza gently. "May Tilly and I come in?"
I don't look very good right now,
said Cameron.
"Nonsense, you're very cute. Please."
Though hesitant, Cameron opened the door, and Tilly saw that this boy was wrapped from head to toe in bandages. The only thing visible was his left eye. They entered his room, and Tilly stared at the boy, who nervously twiddled his wrapped fingers, gazing back. "Are you a mummy?" Tilly asked, and Cameron nodded, body trembling briefly.
If I knew that someone was coming over, I would have cleaned up a bit.
He sounded very self-conscious. "How do mummies clean up?" asked Tilly, and Eliza inhaled sharply as Cameron began to cry, dampening the fabric on his face, even in the spot where the right eye should have been.
I try my best, but I'm so ugly. Why am I this ugly?
Horrified, Tilly waved her hands quickly. "No, that's not what I meant," she said desperately. "I mean, like, do you wash those bandages? Or—" She wasn't sure how to go on.
Yeah,
he sniffled, rubbing his visible eye. I hate the way I look without them, though. I'm all wrinkled and dusty and gray. My other eye is missing, and my teeth are blackened and some are gone. While my wraps wash, I clean my skin very carefully with powdered baking soda, because if I were to immerse myself in water, I'd probably start to mold. Then I take my wraps and spritz them lightly with a mild fragrance, and put them back on. I try to put them on neatly so that I don't look so filthy and horrible, but it's hard to do it on your own, even if you've been doing it for hundreds of years.
Have you ever thought of getting wraps in different colors and patterns? Asked Tilly. Sometimes when I feel like I don't look my best, I wear more colorful clothes, and it makes me feel a little less self-conscious. Accessories help too.
I'm so scared to go shopping, though, because I just know everyone is looking at me and thinking, wow, that guy is so trashy.
Cameron hung his head.
I'm such a coward.
Cameron, I've seen many pictures of mummies that look horrible. You're a butterfly compared to them, said Tilly with a smile. She couldn't tell for sure, but the way his cheekbones shifted suggested that he had just smiled back.
Will you maybe come with me when I go to the mall?
He asked anxiously.
Maybe help me pick out stuff so I don't make a mistake?
Of course I will, Tilly replied. Just then, there was the sound of glass crashing in the next room, making all three of them jump.
He's been doing that all day,
Cameron told Eliza.
Scares the living dead out of me.
I'll go have a talk with him, Eliza sighed. It was nice seeing you. We'd love it if you came down to dinner for once. We really do like you. Cameron smiled again, and he nodded gently, waving to them as they left. Eliza leaned into Tilly and whispered, I think he likes you. I'm flattered, but he might be a little old for me, she joked, and Eliza giggled.